Oh, I see it now. It says live on Facebook.
It's there now? All right, good.
Yeah,
Okay, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We were just into a nice little
I
conversation.
know.
Realized that we weren't even live. But again, I apologize, but I do want to welcome you guys to another Taj Tuesday. This week we have a phenomenal person with us, Roicia Banks. Again,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and introduce her again. Roicia is born and raised in the great state of Arizona. She was in the foster care system until she was 8 years old when she was adopted by a single mother of three, hoping to give her a better life. She spent most of her upbringing in Winslow, Arizona. She graduated with honors in 2007 from Winslow High and went on to the Arizona State University to earn a double Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and African American Studies. As a master social worker, she has career experiences working in both state and tribal government. Roicia, again, thank you. Thank you for being here again.
Thank you for having me. It's all good. We had a great conversation without y'all, basically.
Yeah. So, pretty much, but what we want to go ahead and discuss this week with you guys again is the current events going on here in America. We were just actually touching on the topic of racial divide in America that's going on right now. I would also like to get to trauma in the Black community. That's a topic that I think a lot of people bypass. When speaking about trauma, and also the racism in the healthcare center. Um, Roicia has a lot of facts that she can go ahead and share with us about the different policies and healthcare system. So we want to go ahead and just jump right back into it. Roicia, I believe we were talking about the racial divide in America right now. I mentioned that on my Facebook timeline. I have so many friends on Facebook. I have a lot of friends here from Arizona from my time playing with the Rattlers. I have a lot of friends from back home. So California, Wisconsin, everywhere. So I have a very diverse friends list, right? I try to manage it from time to time. Some people say some outrageous things, you know what I mean? And these are just fans, people that don't really know me personally. So
Sure, sure.
sometimes you gotta do the cleaning up, But
Yeah, totally.
you know, again, Marisha, if you can just go ahead and tell them what they missed.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. My name is Roicia Banks. I'm a social worker, and it's kind of what I do, what I love. So we were talking about racism, well, the racial divide in America, and just kind of asking my take on it. And for me, my response is I'm excited about it. Like 2020 has been very exciting to watch, as a sociologist or what have you, studying people and movements. And so, um, and just I mean, it's really hard to like compress what we discussed, but just really being excited about
Take your time.
the unpacking that everybody is doing and the time that we really have like to sit with ourselves and sit with our feelings. COVID is also a test to that kind of reflection that's happening right now because we have to learn who we are again. We have to learn our family members and our children, and we have to kind of sit with reality. So we're not busy, we're not running, we're not, ripping and running and doing whatever. So it's constantly just in your face also. That's why it feels that way because we're used to, ripping and running. And for people of color, for Black people, it's like, well, you guys may have a break from it, but it's something that we experience all day long. So it's just kind of great to sit back and watch America unfold. And I had touched a little bit about like America having to come to terms with its historical trauma and its past, and why
Mhm.
things are, why racism is a system, why racism is a system within systems, and it's sometimes it's personal, sometimes it's not personal. So it's really been exciting to see people on my friends list who I know at one point in time were yelling Blue Lives Matter, and then now this year are hollering Black Lives Matter, and really going toe to toe with their white family members members and their white friends, and really being armed with facts, that they did research, they did the reading, they did the listening. And so for me, I get excited about that type of progress, because to me, that means we're moving in the right direction instead of sweeping it under the rug and kind of acting like it doesn't exist. The world sees that it exists. And so it's kind of time to acknowledge it too. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah, for sure. Just going off of that, there's definitely it's a different feeling, right? I mean, it's I'm just talking from personal experience. It's a different feeling since the passing of George Floyd, and compared to previous cases, right? We immediately seen the police officers get arrested, and charges are being brought against them. They're changing training. Like there's a lot of things that are happening, right? Sure. But not only that, you hit the nail right on the head when you said people are changing. Your friends that were yelling Blue Lives Matter are yelling Black Lives Matter, right? Yeah, so definitely. I also think, that it's opening up the eyes of people. I mean, that George Floyd passing was a very upsetting video, and and another thing about my timeline, I'm just sorry, I'm going bouncing all over the place, but the racial divide that I see, right? There's people on my timeline that they don't talk about George Floyd, right? All they talk about is the riots. You know what I mean? It's all the people that died during the riots. You know what I mean? And listen, life is precious and it shouldn't be wasted on anything, right? But let's not forget the focus of why the riots happened in the first place. And you could, I mean, there's a lot of people that just like to stir the pot, and get other people going. And it's bigger than I think what's bigger than the racial divide in America right now, for some reason, it's like liberals and conservatives. And that's getting a little off topic, but it's.
I think you said a lot in a short amount of time, and I first want to go back to your initial with George Floyd, and this time feeling different for me. This time doesn't feel different, for me, each video that came out, it tore at my heart, and each one that after that, and it seemed like it just got closer and closer and closer to family, home. And there was a point in my life where I was like, yo, I am grieving strangers. Like, it is tearing me down grieving. So when Ahmaud Arbery, I didn't even watch the video. I was like, I can't continue to subject myself to secondary PTSD. We live and we feel those experiences and we take them on as our own. And it's so hard to constantly put yourself through that mentally and emotionally. So for George Floyd, by the first week, I saw a lot of the political kind of responses as well. And I said, okay, well, I guess this time I have to sit down and watch it. And I didn't finish it when I saw kind of him lose his bowels and stuff like that. I was like, okay, I'm done, and for me, it just wasn't different. And I say that only because it's different. It's being presented as different. We still see the same thing over and over. A unarmed, helpless Black man, incapable of harming anyone in the position that they're in, and then yet still ending in death. And I think the only reason why people are framing it as different is because he couldn't, there's nothing interacting to say, oh, well, that person came in and that's why, or this person, there's no like conflict. How people are like, well, I want to see the other story. Well, I want to see the other side of the story. I don't believe that's just a confrontation. Like, I want to hear the rest of it. This time it was just like, why does it matter? Like, he's clearly, so I think that's why it's being taken as different, because we have nothing to grapple with but to sit there and watch a person struggle to breathe for 9 minutes. So then the other piece, just with the political, I don't know if, and it might be intergenerational thing too. So I want to acknowledge that. My timeline looks maybe looks different, maybe 10, 15 years from, one time you may have went to college or graduated high school. So your age group looks different and maybe has some kind of conflict, and maybe your career path that you chose appeals to a different demographic or what have you. So my timeline and my demographic looks pretty good. I don't really see a lot of conflict because those are people who I associate with, people who I know I don't have to, get too riled up over. So we're pretty much consistent with humanitarian rights. But now if I go to their parents' page, then I see something different, so that also gets me kind of excited too, because it's racism is a learned behavior. So if I see that your parents are inherently racist, and you probably know that, you act accordingly and you get it, and you're a millennial or you're, you know what I'm saying, and you don't pass those types of things on. Now you're still benefiting from racism, if you're not speaking out against it or using your voice. But for the most part, it's good to see those kind of changes because those are generationally learned, so if you see that kind of divide, you're like, oh, okay, well, at least they got it with their kids.
Yeah. There's so how do you feel? I mean, the statues that are getting torn down, and
couldn't be happier.
Yeah, there's I mean, I went to a elementary school called Christopher Columbus Elementary back in New Haven, Connecticut. And the narrative on Christopher Columbus, it wasn't until I was in college. I was an Afro-Am major myself. And it's crazy the things that you learn out of books. You know what I mean? Like I learned
the American population isn't educated though. Like that's the problem. Like I read that the national reading average is the 5th grade. For the nation, like comprehension it falls within the 5th grade level. So that tells me a lot. And that's why newspaper articles, they write in specific styles, because they got to be able to meet a wide audience. Exactly. They're not going to be dropping these bars with, you got to get a thesaurus to look through. Like, what are they talking about? It's very basic, very to the point, for those reasons. So anyways, where was I going with that? You had said something. Dang.
I'm not sure, but if you're stuck, we can come back to it. I would like to have you touch base on social roots. If you would like to go ahead and let everybody know, you're like what motivated you to go ahead and get that started, and like what you do, let the people that don't know about your works,
thanks.
Things like that. Yeah.
Excuse me. Yeah. So my name is Roicia Banks, and I'm the owner and the only person at this moment getting paid and business. I wish I could grow, but I'm having issues. Hold on, I don't want to tap on these. So it's as a master social worker, I basically, how I tell social roots is I have to go through my life story, right? So I was raised in the foster care system. I was adopted at 8. I was so 100% that I was going to be a judge or a lawyer, or the president of the United States. I was really obsessed with that. And it just got really hard. I was great in high school, I was great in college, but it just seemed unachievable. And at the time I was like, well, I really like helping people. So my best friend encouraged me to be a social worker. While I was living in Texas, and I really, really discovered at that time, like that was my passion and my calling, is helping people, being a voice for people, being a voice for children and families. So I know for me, it helped in my caseload to be like talking to a child, like I've actually been where you're sitting. I know what that feels like, but let me show you. I used to sit with my kids and show them pictures of like me in Paris and just let them dream, because those were very, very big ideas for me as growing up in a low socioeconomic community.
Yeah.
So me connecting with my kids, like that was the best thing. So I knew I had a gift. I knew I was talented in that way. I worked for a tribal government, and I don't know if I spoke earlier, but my mother is Hopi. I'm Native American, African American, and French descent. But my mother is Native American, and I was raised on tribal communities. And so the goal was always to come back and to serve my community and to serve my people. Um, I was employed with a government agency out here, a tribal government agency. I worked for them about 4 or 5 years. And while doing so, it just kind of allowed me to put together my upbringing and my education with social work, mental health, and behavioral health, or what have you. And then, of course, the cultural influences that, behavior influence behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and just being able to be a catalyst for change. But I knew at the time there's a lot of political strings and there's all this stuff and people got to get paid. If all the kids were out of foster care system, there would be no jobs. So you got to have kids in the foster care system to pay people, essentially. It's a business like any prison,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. So I just kind of got fed up with that idea and rejected that notion that is not how this works. That's not how families work. That's not like they deserve, what I deserve. So especially talking about permanent families. So um, I wanted to start something that was inclusive to cultural competencies. I wanted to start something that where people can say like, oh, talk to this person because she knows she gets it. She's Black, or she knows she gets it. She's Native. She knows she gets it because she tries to understand other people's cultures and just how families work. Families don't work the same at all.
Oh,
So
not at all.
there's no blueprint, right? So like they got to be treated holistically and individually and uniquely as possible. And so my love for that and my love for community and community activism, and I grew up in a village where literally the village raised me, so I know what it's like to have community, and just really kind of emphasizing that like my community is aware of who I am and what I do, and they know they can DM me, text me, email me, or do you know this therapist, or do you know this, or do you know that? So just really trying to be a change agent for mental health around marginalized communities. So that's inclusive to like the LGBTQIA community or indigenous populations. So it's,
See, but
if I answered that.
oh yeah, you answered it. It seems like you got your work cut out for you. It definitely. I appreciate the work that you're trying to do. I kind of had the same inspiration for wanting to give back. I feel like I didn't do enough while I was playing, right? So I kind of wanted when I was retired, just go ahead and start giving back. It's
Yeah.
one of the top reasons for the show. So if someone wanted to, like, say, make a donation to your foundation, or how could they support? If for people that are watching right now.
Definitely. Thank you. So, one of the initiatives that I'm spearheading right now, specifically raising donations for, is my signature annual event entitled Attitude, an African American Summit for Men. Well, I'm sorry, an African American. Oh my gosh, a mental health summit for African American women. Literally, it's so long. So,
No problem.
it's called Attitude, and I will just talk about it really quickly. So, I went to a similar conference and it just inspired me to do something of that nature for mental health in Black women, just because we're disproportionately affected. And so this past January, I was able to host over 100 Black women all day long, talking about mental health disparities that specifically affect them, oh my gosh, everything from baby blues to suicide prevention and being culturally competent with the ideas that, you know, mental health in the Black community is considered a taboo. You know, you don't talk to people about your problems, and you don't need to take medication for this, you don't need to do that. And so really just trying to break down those stereotypes and those barriers that each community kind of faces. And so I'm raising donations now to have that and to bring it back in January, doing 250 women. And specifically, you can go to Social Roots, well, www.socialrootsllc.org. And then you would go to the Attitude tab, and under that frame is the donate section. And we're also doing a call right now for speakers and volunteers, but it's going to just change to speakers because it's going to be held in January and we're still in this COVID situation. And so we might be moving to like a Zoom platform.
Yeah, it's totally understandable.
Messing everything up.
The way COVID's going right now has a lot of things backed up. But for sure, if you need a speaker, you know, I could help you out.
Yeah, well, it's the speaker call is very specific. I didn't talk about that because the point of Attitude is for the clientele to be reflective in the professionals. So that's what was a game changer. I only had African American medical doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and clinical social workers be able to present that information because it comes then from a non-biased perspective. And we talk a little bit later about what that looks like. And so my intent for that, and of course, if you see somebody look like you, you're more comfortable with them 9 times out of 10, you know, you're able to identify and relax a little bit. And so you're able to be yourself a little bit more. You're not code switching, you know what I'm saying? And so I wanted to create an environment that is like, so like leave the egos at the door. This is a time for us to love on each other and learn what we got to learn and share this mental health with our community. And so I targeted Black women because Black women are pillars in their households. You know, grandmothers, like the youngest person who came was 14 and the oldest was 91. So yeah, it was super awesome. So we're gonna have to do it in person in a few years, but it'll be done over Zoom this time. And just again, the call to action is for Black women mental health professionals, because the goal is to eliminate that conscious of like, oh, I'm Black and they're gonna see me as XY, or they're not gonna hear me or see or understand me or take my issue seriously. Or, you know, again, I talked a little bit about code switching, not being able to like be your full self because you're aware of non-Black people in your presence. So mental health is that important to me that I was like, nobody can come if you're like, you're not Black, you can't come. If you're not a woman, you can't come, you know, because it's that important that we be brutally honest with ourselves.
Totally understandable. So let's get into the trauma in the Black community. Now, we spoke briefly about it the other day on our call, but I would just like to share some of the traumatic things that I remember from when I was a child, right?
Okay.
I grew up in a single parent household. I never really knew my dad. The first devastating thing I remember, probably 7 years old, and I remember that we got evicted from our house. And I still remember the clear as day, my mom, you know, on the phone, the landlord, and I guess, you know, that's when she got the news, and she was up crying all night. And, you know, at the time I didn't really understand it. You know, I was just, it took me a while to process it. But what I realized was that, you know, my mom was crying because she wasn't in any pain, right? But it was just something that stuck with me all my life, right? And always like you know, maybe it caused a little bit of anxiety for me later on in life, making sure I got all my bills paid. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what trauma does.
yeah, then I remember another time I had to be maybe 10 or 11, and well, a bunch of people, is like, just my family and a whole bunch of other families. We went to a park to have like a little barbecue picnic, like I wouldn't say a reunion, but more like a big old get together. And the park wasn't too far away from where I lived. And I remember it was me and another kid, and we were just down at the creek, just churning over rocks looking for, salamanders, crawfish, whatever's inside it, just kids being kids,
Yeah, definitely.
I stayed a little downstream, and he went a little upstream. And when he went upstream, he ended up finding a dead body.
Oh my
Now,
God.
yeah, it was horrible. It was a pregnant lady. She looked
Oh my
young.
God.
I don't know how young she was, but her belly was definitely, like 8 months at least. And I remember just seeing her laying there. And I'm thinking, and she was naked, and she's just a body under a bridge, and I'm just like, man, like what, it was messed up, and I know that people in the Black community experience way worse than the things that I've seen, right? And that's not even just like all the fights that I got into, and I mean just a whole bunch of other stuff. That's just the tip of the iceberg of things that I've seen. But I have friends that are dear to me, best friends. One of my former roommates with the Rattlers, I don't want to say his name, he might not feel but
comfortable.
Yeah, he would wake up with night terrors in the middle of the night, the night before game, from the experiences that he witnessed when he was a teenager. And it's like, night, like he witnessed his friends die right in front of him. And it's like multiple friends, and family and stuff like that. So I mean, it's something that nobody talks about, right? I feel like it's kind of like overlooked, all the
Absolutely.
all the tough stuff that you see as a kid. And I'm not saying it's every Black community, and I'm not saying that every youth had the same experiences as me and my good friend, but there's people out there having these experiences and dealing with this trauma, and they don't even know that they've been traumatized.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? So I mean, what's your take on that? Like how,
Yeah, so two things. One, what you're talking about is like an ACE score, right? An adverse childhood experience. And one of the goals I did at Attitude was I put a sheet inside for everybody to fill out. And I don't know if you're familiar with what an ACE score is, but it's a checklist, 1 to 10, and 10 being the highest that you score. And so if this is something you experience, you get a 1, right? And so I'm a 7 out of 10, which is extremely high, which puts me at risk a whole bunch of other things. They say the normal national average is at a 4 as far as per person experiencing an adverse childhood experience. One can be like a parent going to jail, or a parent having addiction, that sort of thing. And or have you in your life been emotionally or verbally or sexually abused? Like those are very clear. You just add it up. So I'm a 7. And I encourage you to kind of do your research, take your own test, and kind of see where you fall. And so when we talk about trauma in the Black community, that's a pretty, I mean, by the time you read to 4, you're like, okay, that's it's a measurement tool to see exactly with socioeconomic status, ethnicity, and all of those things. So it's not like we're making it up. Right. And I think that's a lot of what the issues are, that people want to discount the Black experience. And part of it is environment. But I mean, and I want to make sure I tie these two together, but I was raised in a tribal community. And I would say that my upbringing was not that far different from being raised in the hood, tribal communities are so overlooked. And for me being both, and living in the hood. I lived in Third Ward, Houston as well. Like it was almost like mirror image. And it's set up that way. One's in a city, one's in rural community, whatever, but it's set up that way. And so for me, a lot of historical and generational trauma and pain and behaviors that I've seen, addictions that I saw, have been generational. And so environment sometimes doesn't even matter, like thank God I got out and I was focused. But you can still have a middle class upbringing kind of experience and still be carrying emotional and trauma and baggage from your parents, and maybe you're anxious now because you lived that experience about your mom. That's very minor. It worked out for the good in you because now you pay bills on time, and you know what I'm saying, you're good in that way. But sometimes those turn into negative behaviors, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't even want to say anything outlandish, or I can't even think of an example, but at least your anxiety turned into a positive for you, you know. And for me, my mom was very anxious about time and being on time. And I never knew why. And now I have anxiety about being on time to the point where it gets me physically ill if I'm not on time. And with her, it's because being dismissed as a person of color, like you got to be early. They got to make sure that you're there, because if you're not, you're dismissed, and they don't care about you when you missed your appointment, even if you got there right at 6 o'clock. So my mom, in her survival mode, is very anxious about time. And I think it's just something as minor as like, oh, she just wants to be there early. No, it's because it's connected to a negative experience. So, or a traumatic one. But I think that what people could probably try to be more graceful with Black people, especially, is that we are walking around all of the time carrying all of these different triggers and anxieties and emotional responses, that when you tap on us, you're like, hey man, like we're so like laser focused, and you can't be just loosey goosey around people who have experienced trauma, because you don't know what triggers them. And I feel like non-Black people or non-people of color expect us to operate and act like them, somebody who hasn't experienced some of those things, and you expect us to perform at a capability that you're performing at, and we're just not capable all of the time. So even your buddy who's having night terrors the night before, like he is going to play his best the next day, but he's not performing at his best because he didn't get a good night's sleep, and who knows if he ate the night, like who knows if he, like there are so many intersectional issues that go into like what it means to be Black and experience trauma in the Black community, that when we start to unpack it, like it's just layer after layer after layer, and even food insecurities. Like, oh man, my mom was a foster parent for all of my life, and just dealing with children who come into the home based off experiences that they had and hoarding food. And, that's because they've experienced a household with food insecurity. Like they think we're going to run out of food at any time, so they got to stash their own, little things like that to me is what makes up the Black experience of trauma in the Black community. It's not so much gang violence. It's not so much, oh, I heard a drive-by. It's the hood. It's never, for me, it's never those things. It's those little things that just tack on and tack on and tack on, and to the point where we're just living in a constant state of stress and operating with PTSD symptoms.
Yeah, it's I'm just sitting here and you're talking about everything, and I'm thinking about back when I was younger. It's I'm starting to bring up memories, and I used to act out a lot when I was a child, like before I met football, where I had somewhere to exert all that craziness. There was nights where say, I don't know, me and my mom, we got into it about homework, and then, there's no food in the house. So it's like, it's all this stuff building up. And then, I get to school, and,
Yep.
I'm 5 minutes late for class, and, the teacher might not even say anything slick, but I'm gonna give it to that teacher, because I'm having a bad day. I don't even want to be at school. Yeah, so I mean, it's stuff like that. Then I could just imagine.
Top of the day.
Yeah, I mean, that's just how I start my day. And then, boom, 10 days, suspension. 10 days outdoor suspension. But then I'm on the streets for 10 days now, trying to get my buddies to skip school and come hang out with me. It's so there. I mean, it's just what I'm saying is there's a lot of things that happen, and there's. I mean, I don't want to say like. I mean, I don't know. It reflected on me while I was in school. I used to see a social worker when I was in school, and she helped me deal with a lot of stuff. But I was acting out more than anything else, and I could see how being raised in that environment, right? I always demanded respect. Like, you needed to respect me. I'm 12 years old, but you need to respect me. You're supposed to respect your elders, But then it's like, again, like, you're not my mom. You know what I mean? You're not my father. So it's just
there's so much pain.
Yeah, always like all the time. And I was fortunate enough to be able to have an outlet in football, but everybody doesn't have that outlet. Everybody's not blessed with the size and things like that. And I see so many videos on the internet, and teenagers acting out, and it's they don't really need to do it. I'm not going to tell you that I'm not going to go ahead and co-sign what they're doing, but there's an underlying issue that needs to be addressed. But it's I think too many people just they don't know how to act, or like Ratchet is thrown out too many times. It's just Ratchet. They just on that hood shit. You know what I mean? But it's bigger than that. You know what I mean? And I don't want to say everybody in the Black community is suffering from a mental illness or anything like that. But you do have people that have their struggles.
100%. And I mean, and it's not. I don't want to minimize the Black experience, because literally our struggles are worse. Like, even if we start off in the same kind of environment, we're still going to endure more just because of racism being systematic. So although, your mother may have gotten evicted or what have you, like, there are people who can just go right on to their parents' house, post up like, oh, I didn't do this, and it doesn't have that same impact. So not having that safety net or the security or that sense of consistency, or that somebody who in your life is consistent, also is a big part of it. That's why they say mentorships are so important, because young people need consistency. Like, if you're gonna say you're gonna do something, you got to follow through with them. You can't let them down. At least they can have one person that they can call on, because a lot of the times, like, your own personal experience and the children I see, they're one parent households, and where they're sharing parental responsibilities, and that is a lot. Like, I was a child who shared parental responsibilities. It's unfair. Oh my gosh, it forces you to grow up in ways you didn't realize. My mom, I'm the middle child. I was always like, I'm not even the oldest. Why are you making me in charge? But I had a social worker tell me, like, she was cultivating your leadership skills. Like, now you're able to make decisions and do this and be, a leader, because someone entrusted in you to make those decisions for the family. So I'm like, okay, bet. But at the same time, like, I didn't get to have those experiences that other kids had. So I don't want to discount the Black community experience, just because when we start to climb out of that box, it's just harder for us. We don't get the same opportunities. We don't get the same resources. We don't get the same network or connections or chances. Hopefully we look decent, 9 times out of 10, by the time we get to a point and want to change our lives around, we don't really look like someone who's deserving of a chance, so tattoos and, who knows what else. But it's harder for Black people. It is. And I wish I can go into every single, way in which way it is, but there are many examples, especially dealing with the police. There are many examples of slaps on the wrist, and then extreme cases of, this is too much. But
for sure. I've had friends get pulled over and just get sent home, and I've had friends get pulled over and end up going in jail. And it's over the littlest things.
Yeah.
The littlest things. It's just unfortunate. We have those biases out there, and some cops feel like they should let other people off over others. But I mean, that's not what we're working towards. We're working towards equality. We're working towards right. If you're gonna do it for one person, do it for another.
Exactly.
I've heard situations of cops, catching drunk drivers, people sleeping in their car, and then shoving them in the cab and getting them home, things like that. But then all of a sudden,
we all go down that road of like, I don't like cops. Like, okay, cool. Like, I have family members who are cops too. I'm not a cop hater, nothing like that. But I know what it's also like to be in an environment where you feel odd one out, but you gotta be there. You know what I'm saying? Like, and you conform, and you lower your voice, and you don't tell, and you do. So that's what I feel like, all cops aren't bad. I'm like, well, the good ones aren't speaking up enough. Because if the good ones were speaking up enough, we wouldn't have to tell y'all about the bad ones. So, I see it all the time. I see the press releases about a DUI on a politician, and they go home and they have a misdemeanor, and that's like, well, that's not the law. The law definitely says something else. Okay, but
I don't even, and it's crazy because some cops have relatives that they don't get in trouble for nothing. Not even DUIs or, well, I'm not gonna say
that's
nothing.
True too.
You're not just gonna go murder somebody and then you're gonna get off. Well, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what cops do. I'm not an officer.
Me neither.
But it's unfortunate that we even have to have these kind of conversations. It really is. But another reason why I said I feel like things are changing this time around since what happened with George Floyd is they're actually changing the way that they're training police officers. And I was actually in a little back and forth debate with someone on my timeline earlier about the cops having to be responsible for their own lawyers, responsible for, they get
the union
sued.
Is the problem. Yeah.
Well, that's a whole nother monster right there. And, I was a part of the Arena Football League's union. And, now.
But you guys aren't killing people though.
No. For me, it was only quarterbacks, but all joking aside, I do feel like they're trying to take steps to go ahead and make things better. But again, these steps should have been taken a long time ago.
So my thing is that it's a system that was built on white supremacy, policing, the historical way of policing. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I just muted.
Sorry. So for me, it's the historical piece of policing. So it's never going to be fixed because it was birthed out of something that was intentionally meant to maintain a system in place and to protect that system. So, and I say that working with cops, going through their training, sitting there, listening to the same stuff that they get, and bottom line, I will say education is a big part of it. Like, you can be a high school diploma and go and be a police officer tomorrow and be out of the academy quicker than a barber could. Like, the barber and the beautician go to school longer than a police would for police academy and police officer. So for me, that's already problematic. And then they make almost the same amount. So for example, I'm a master's educated person and I should be fit in a bracket of salary that quote says I deserve it. And police officers, high school diploma, feel like want to do something with their lives, great, not quite the military. And really, that is the conversation. We need a job. We need a good paying job to support our families.
Mhm.
And so they go into the law enforcement, and then they make money. They make more money than me and I'm a social worker with 3 degrees in similar cases, circumstances in terms of um violence and communities and knocking on doors and hypervigilance, and we put our lives on the line as well. I'm not going to make it seem like it's the same, but it's like people don't like us. We come take people's kids away, and if somebody were to come to your house to take your kids away, how would you act? You know what I'm saying?
I had DC. They used to call DCYF back in the day, I think.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
in Connecticut or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they came to my house a couple times when I was a kid. Like I said, it was a pretty wild household.
Yeah, they know the spot. So I mean, I say that to say that it's impossible to change the police system. It has to be dismantled. And I know that's extreme to say, but community policing has been proven to be effective. I mean, it just makes me think of a bigger issue. Like if we trust so much in our police and the system, like why do we have SWAT? Why do we have CIA? Why do we have all these like different levels of like militarized policing? You know what I'm saying? If we are supposed to trust the police, even us carrying guns. Like we were at the gun range today, but I'm like, we must not trust the police, because if someone was invading our property or whatever, like the first thing you would want to do is call police and expect the police to uphold the law and defend you and come in, guns ablazing and whatever. You don't trust the police if you want your own gun to protect you at all times.
I mean,
it's a weird concept, right?
It's weird. Especially, I mean, some people can be hesitant to call the police if they're defending their house with their gun, because I mean, cops might show up and think that I'm the perp. I've seen it. I read about it. Police break down.
It cut out. What did you say?
I'm saying that if I were to defend myself by someone coming in with a gun, I'm not saying that it's 100%, but there is a possibility that they could think I was the one trying to rob the house, or something.
That's happened.
Like that's what I'm saying. It's happened. I mean, it's cops
That's
going.
true.
Yeah, cops going to people's houses, and it's the wrong house. And I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say that I don't trust the cops, because I do, but along with me trusting the cops, there's still a risk. You know what I mean? So I mean, hey, if it's a risk I got to take to protect my family, then I'm going to give them a call. But if it's something I can handle myself,
right? And that's the thing, is that people want us to constantly be in full, complete trust of the police, and it's impossible. I'm dealing with a situation right now as well, and I don't trust that they're doing their job, even though they tell me that they are. And to make my assumption true or valid, with the situation with the Tempe PD and Tempe Marketplace, I was like, we were talking, I was like, well, why don't we just ask all the stores if they got footage? Like, I don't believe that they canvassed this area. I don't think that they asked these people. And so we had our team go out and canvass the stores, and they were like, nope. It was like 60%. 60% said the detectives came by, asked for footage, and the other 40% did not. So when you go out and do the investigation work yourself that quote police should be doing, now I really don't trust that y'all are doing what you say you're doing, because we just went to go, we just double checked those tracks and confirmed what we already assumed. And so it's stuff like that where it's like, then why do we have a police system? It's really, really challenging to believe and trust wholeheartedly in that system when all you have been proven to see or engage with has been negative. And I have yet to have a positive experience with the police. My last positive experience was my ROTC. I mean, what is he? The police at school. But
Yeah.
after that, it was, I got lucky because he was a community, kind of policeman, and everybody knew him, and he knew everybody. So that looks a lot different than a stranger, rolling up on you.
Yeah, it's just some random person. Roicia, we have definitely went past the time. I have a few questions here, and then I'll let you go.
Okay.
So, right, question number one: how do you feel about consuming too much media and news, especially over the last few weeks, and how does it tie into mental health for the Black community?
So I'm gonna answer like for me, Roicia, and then I'll answer as a professional. For me, I like the news. I don't have a problem with it. I will tune out when it's the murdering of Black people. If we're talking about that specifically, I don't watch that. But for the most part, I will watch all the news, including Fox, CNN, MSNBC. I watch all of them because I want to know the language and the rhetoric and how they, you know what I'm saying? We all can, and it's one thing to say you watch the news and be one-sided and to repeat everything Fox says, and you're like, that sounds like exactly like it came out of Fox News, like, have you tried to watch the other ones? So for people like me who enjoy knowing what's going on in the world, I say watch the whole spectrum, because at least then you'll be able to decipher between like the bullshit basically, and get to a common idea about whatever they're talking about. At least you'll have your own like idea about it at that point. That's how I do the news, versus just honing in on one channel, and I don't do that. How it pertains to my mental health, for me, like I said, it doesn't bother me. I enjoy the news. I like politics. I majored in it. I like being engaged in all of that, because it also makes me informed. An informed citizen. An informed citizen is a good citizen when you're voting, so
Yeah.
But yeah, voting is so important. But for the mental health piece, for me, I check out. I don't watch killing Black people on news anymore. I'm not going to invite myself into that secondary kind of trauma that I talked about. Now, for other people, you gotta do what's best for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not gonna say don't watch it at all. I'm gonna say take an evaluation of self and say, like, are you cool to watch the news closer to dinner time, evening time, or is that gonna like sleep into or get into your sleep at night, and then you're gonna be worrying about it, and you're not gonna sleep at night because you watch the news. Whatever that looks like for you, I would say make it make sense. That's something I say all the time. If it affects you to not be able to sleep at night, don't watch the 6 p.m. news. Like, watch the AM news, and you can go about your day and kind of process throughout the day and be okay. But take an evaluation of your own self and what works best for you, and kind of manipulate it to that. Also, for me, constant check-ins, like with the news, if I feel like it's really overwhelming, like, George Floyd for me wasn't overwhelming to see the riots or nothing like that. I was like, oh, I don't care, burn it down. Like, I don't care. I know that's extreme, but like literally buildings can be replaced and lives can't. And I'm so happy to see a lot of business owners repeat that and share that same sentiment, because it rings so true. I've seen so many people who are like, if this was my kid murdered, like, burn it down. We have insurance. Like, the rage is felt. We feel that rage, but it takes a level of compassion and human to be able to even utter that. Like, nobody in this world will be like, oh, do you want your house or do you want your kid? Well, burn the house.
Yeah, that's easy. That's an
easy. So like, people want, oh, this is America. Like, no. This is a human, So, and just humanizing George Floyd. Like, we have to continue to tell, like, he is a human. We don't care about the criminal backgrounds. We don't care about any, not even just George, any person. We don't care about all of that. Hell, they could have rehabilitated and found a cure to cancer. We will never know because he was killed. So, yeah, mental health in the Black community. And again, my timeline looks like people like me who I acknowledge are in a higher level of education, who are in the same kind of ideas politically and socially. So I don't really see a lot of, I guess, the conflicting kind of interactions.
Yeah, there's so much of it.
I know everybody feels entitled to it. The thing about humans is we all want to be validated. We all want to be heard and understood and, tapped on the shoulder for being a good job. And you're right. And you're so smart. I didn't even think of that. Oh my God. We all want to be like that. But for the reality is just like, I don't even think the news is bad. I think the social media engaging, that's where I think that we can control our mental health and how we've been affected by it. Because I think as a Black person, as an Indigenous person, as we feel entitled to that voice and we want to defend that voice and we want to go in there and say all the things and all of our racism experiences in our lives, and we just want to tackle each person one by one. That could be mentally and emotionally and physically exhausting. Taking on that combat and conflict, and people who are not seeking to understand, they're seeking to respond. So you're really just wasting your time. So I'm like, if we can talk about anything within mental health in the news, I would say game recognized game. Don't engage with people who are not seeking to understand or seeking to learn, because that looks different from people who are being combative and trying to protect their whiteness and their white fragility. So.
Okay. All right, so the next question I have here, how do we bring about real change and not symbolic change? A good example is spray painting BLM on things, but more along the lines of real reform.
I think that is real change, number one. As minor and as as it may seem. Black Lives Matter. I would rather see Black Lives Matter painted on every single corner of this country than to see Mount Rushmore. That's what I don't want to see. You know what I'm saying? Like, why, like, there are so many complexities in this country that are just overtly racist that I can't even take it. So we talked a little bit about the statues even. So that's progress. We don't need to commemorate these terrible, awful people. The Union, there was a whole war, lots of Americans died, slavery ended. Like, we don't need to commemorate any of that. Like, so I'm like, we're moving forward. Y'all lost, get over it. Like, and even here in Arizona, we have Confederate monument over here. And for what, I don't know. We're not a part of the Confederacy when all of that. We have no parts in it, but people who moved here felt there should have been a statue. So there is one. And we were down there the other day, and I'm like, this is weird, but at the same time, like, this is also cool that Japan has, like, their history. Like, so, and then the second part, I only say that because it's like every single state, and I travel and visit a lot, like, I make that intentional to see what those historical artifacts are in those cities and how progressive that city is, so to speak. But reform and change, like, I say this a lot, and I mean this in the most loving way, that I don't think that we'll see actual reform or change politically until the baby boomers die. And I say that with love, because the baby boomer people who are just like holding on a dear life for those seats and are putting thousands of dollars into their political seats to maintain that power, like, it's almost impossible to penetrate. It really is. You can have the best candidate and still it'll tank when someone comes in at the last race with the money to buy it up, and it's
Yeah.
conditioning. You know nothing about these people, you know nothing about these politics, but they condition you because you see all of their propaganda. You're like, oh, I recognize this name and it's a Republican, boom. Or I recognize this name, it's a Democrat, boom. You don't even, people don't even take the time to kind of look through and read their ballots. So um,
That
until
was
the
it.
baby boomers die, like, and we can get in, I wouldn't bank too much. Like, yeah, we get little wins here and there, but for the most part, racism will never allow people say we got passed, Obama was president, and it's like, no, what? Yes, he was the president of the United States, but like the Congress was still red, Supreme Court was still red, like Republicans still kind of the checks and balances, people. Like, he doesn't have all this power that you think that he has. It's that's why there's checks and balances involved. And so it was just interesting too, where people felt like we've just reached that level of um, race in America that we can forget about because of Obama.
No.
We ain't even there yet. That was a
Yeah.
scratch on the surface. Like,
Yeah.
that was nothing, So literally, I feel until the baby boomers, red and blue, die off because they're not letting go of their seats, and we can have young people, even Gen Z people are dying on the Zoomer. Like, I believe that they're the game changers.
Yeah.
Millennials like myself
Mhm.
are going to be the ones breaking down the walls and kind of clearing the path, and then Gen Z is going to walk in and be able to take seats. So when that
Well,
happens,
looking forward to it. Looking forward to it. Actually, that leads us to our last question of the day. How important do you believe the black vote would be during the next election?
the next like presidential election.
Well, let me well, just the black
Um,
vote in general. Like some people
so
say if we had the black vote, then Trump wouldn't be in. There's also, I mean, we could also look at state level stuff. I mean, even voting for a sheriff. I mean, just the vote period. For the
um,
community.
man, I think it's super complicated for me to even answer that because I want to go into all of the different levels of like voter suppression and all of that. But I would say, America's 12-13% African American. And even if every single one of us voted, it still wouldn't be enough to sway. That's how I feel.
So,
Statistically, yeah. Now you see higher level concentration like Atlanta. Yeah, it matters in Atlanta if you vote. You know what I'm saying? It's not going to matter in Atlanta I'm sorry, it's not going to matter in Phoenix being a black person if you vote that much, if we're talking about that demographic specifically. But if we collectively came together as the 15,000 black people in Phoenix, I don't know how many people live here, but if we came together, and we all voted, yeah, that's a lot of power behind that. But I think it's a case by case kind of thing, but I wouldn't say presidential nomination. I'm not an expert. I don't want to claim to be an expert, but just knowing the percentage of African American people in the country, and then we can slash that in half for the nonviolent crime and offenses that African American people receive when they go to jail, taking away their right to vote.
mhm.
Like, we just
Yeah,
kind of go down the list. Like, it sucks.
there's a bunch of stuff. It's a long list that goes
It's
back many years.
it is a long list. So that's why I'm like, yes, we all should exercise our right to vote. It's absolutely important, 100%. But to say that, and black women have been known to swing, elections, which is awesome because that power together. But to say that we have that much power might be a little bit too arrogant. But
Yeah, I'm not. You know what?
collectively as minorities, we would.
Yeah, I'm not even sure if I had the question 100% right, but just the
Oh,
the importance of getting out and vote. You have the right to vote.
truly.
You wanna make a change in these policies. You want to make a change. You want a different mayor or
Yeah,
whatever. I mean, there's way more things that you could do just besides just voting. You can go out. You can start
oh,
campaigning for people.
exactly.
There's
You can run.
yeah, you could run yourself, and we see that happening in some places. So
Yes. Yes.
it's just speaking out to the future generations, right? To the teenagers, kids in elementary school. If you wanted to go ahead and make a real change, there's plenty of opportunities for you to do it. You could, be like Roicia here and go ahead and, start your own foundation, go in the back and helping your community. You could become a social worker and help people
Mm-hmm.
individually. You could become a police officer and start from the
Mm-hmm.
bottom and make change. You could run for politics. I mean, there's so many things
So many.
that things that are available for us, especially the younger generations. Like you said earlier, we're just lining it up for the youth to come in and really,
Yeah.
take it home for us. Hopefully, and just wrapping up for the show today. Hopefully, 2020 will be the year that future generations look back on and see all the things that we were dealing with
Yeah.
and see that hopefully 2020 is the year that sparked the change.
Yeah, definitely. It
There's been,
is.
2020 is the year sparked the change and, for the better.
Yeah.
Again, Roicia, thank you so much for coming on the show today. If you're in the comment section and we didn't get to your question today, I apologize. I'll go ahead back into the comment section and see if we can go get those questions answered. Again, Roicia, is there anything
Thank
that you
you.
would like to close off in saying?
No, you touched on all like kind of the wrapping points. If you guys want to, make a change in your community, it's literally volunteer, get involved. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Somebody somewhere is already doing it. I promise you. There's so many nonprofits. Just jump right in and ask how can you serve them. So that's what I would leave with. And I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to kind of talk about these issues with full transparency.
For sure.
That was kind of cool.
Yeah,
Thank you.
We didn't even get to everything that
I
we
told
wanted.
you.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe we revisit the topic
Definitely.
of healthcare later on in the future. I would love to have you back on the show.
Definitely.
Okay, so everybody, thanks again for joining us again for
Thank
another
you.
Taj Tuesday. Thanks again, Roicia, for coming to help us out. Don't forget to go ahead and check out Social Roots, and if you can, go ahead and donate. That would be very much appreciative. Again, everybody, thank you and God bless. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.